Hello and welcome to the future of XYZ. This week is a really important topic, especially for Americans. With us to talk about the future of paid leave is my friend Molly Day. Molly, welcome to the future of XYZ.
Thank you, Lisa. It's great to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us. I know it's a very busy schedule right now. Molly is the executive director at PLUS, that is PL, the symbol plus, and US, which is a movement to win paid family leave by 2022, which is why it's extremely busy time for Molly. Molly is also the former chief strategy officer at Lyft. Lyft, she spent 7 years there, is a nonprofit that empowers families to break the cycle of poverty. She was an intern for Barack Obama when he was the senator from Illinois, which is pretty rad, I must say, on military and veteran affairs, and also an intern at the Department of State, while she was getting her bachelor's in science in social policy and education from Northwestern University in Chicago. So Molly, again, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no, happy to be here. Love that intern shout out. Those were fun times.
I mean, it's very few people that get to say something so cool. So, you know,
it was a cool time to be there.
has to be there. So,
Yeah.
I think the first question for anyone listening, what is paid leave?
Yeah, it's a great question and oftentimes a wonky term. So when we talk about paid leave, we're talking about comprehensive paid family and medical leave. So that includes three pieces. The first is parental leave. So this is what folks oftentimes think about. This is time to welcome a new child into your family. The second thing paid leave is caregiving leave. So this could be time to care for a family member, maybe a family member who's ill or a family member who is near death, and that care space. The third part is also really important, which is personal medical leave. So if you have a surgery, if you had an illness, it's time to take care of yourself. So when we talk about paid leave at Plus, it's about inclusive and comprehensive paid leave for all those moments in life where all of us are going to need at some point to either give or receive care from someone else. So
That's it's really important. And I guess the question it begs is what is the, kind of what is our current state of paid leave right now in America? I mean, I know personally, I've heard from friends, maternity leave is what we talk a lot about. We talk about, parental leave. When I was at Chobani, there was a huge initiative. Obviously, it was quite radical because it was paid parental leave, whether you were fostering or adopting, and it was also for the hourly workers in the factory, which was very, very progressive. But what is the current state of paid leave overall in America right now?
The current state of paid leave is fairly dire as compared to the global context. So the US is one of the few remaining countries on Earth. There are 3 others that do not have any form of paid family leave. So oftentimes we'll say of industrialized countries, no, it's just on Earth. We have the distinction of being one of 4 who do not have paid leave.
Wow.
And yeah, it's pretty striking. And in the context of this country, we have about 113 million people who don't have a single day of paid leave.
That's
That
like
means
1 in 3 Americans.
it's very few. And we see those who do have paid leave are oftentimes folks in white collar jobs, people with high income careers, and the same inequities we see across gender, race, and income show up in who does and doesn't have paid leave in the US. So, only 38% of Black working people have access to paid leave, 27% of Latinos. And actually looking at, and this was important in the context of COVID, of lowest wage working people, 92% of them had not a single day of paid leave. And when you think about who our essential workers were during COVID, who they are today, those are the folks who don't have any time off, and who are also putting their lives really on the front line. So.
Wow. I mean, I have chills. I knew it was dire, but those statistics are really damning. In a system, as you say, where people are putting their lives on the line, but also, I don't know how this plays into mental health, but if you have that pressure of knowing that you can't get sick, that your family cannot get sick, I mean, the mental toll that takes on you as well, I can imagine kind of doubles and triples down.
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, the lack of paid leave means that you put people in the position of making a decision between their paycheck and paying their bills or their loved ones. And I
Mhm.
think if we think about our own lives and where we would like to draw the line, I think most folks in this country would say, I want to be there in the most important moments that matter. And I don't want to carry that weight of thinking about, can I keep the lights on? Can I keep food on the table? But that's just the sheer fact for so many Americans who can access paid leave. So
It's very stark in that context. So I want to just step back from America for a second, because those numbers are damning. I mean, one of 4 countries globally who has no form. But of course, there are countries that are really extreme. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in Europe, which, has much more of a socialist model, one would say, by,
yeah.
ideological terms, which
Mhm.
is basically you pay for it through a combination of government funds, employer funds, and I'm assuming worker pays some kind of tax that goes into this. I mean,
Mhm.
people always joke that you pay such high taxes in like France, for instance, but of course, the burden of my tax burden when I was in France versus now is actually about 5%, especially in New York City tax when you add it in.
Right.
And what I'm getting for it feels like a whole bunch less, especially when it comes to the opportunity to take care of myself and my family. So, I mean, how bad are we, besides just not having anything? How bad are we, or how good is the best model that we could hope to achieve?
It's a great question, and it's making me smile. I'm thinking about when I took paid leave for my daughter's birth. There were a couple other moms in the mom group from Canada, and they just took every opportunity to remind us of how much better their program was. A year of paid leave, no problem. I think the best country, if I'm correct, is Sweden, with about 480 days of paid leave, and both parents, and I want to also be like gender inclusive here, everybody, regardless of your gender identity, gets to participate. The other thing I think is kind of interesting when we think about the US still having this battle here in 2021 is that the actual earliest policies introducing the idea of leave arose in Germany in the 1880s. Now, those were gender regressive policies, but it was really in the 1990s we saw a wave with OECD countries, so a lot of European nations, other large countries who introduced job protected paid leave and then expanded it not only to women for parental leave, but also to men. So I think the average now in these countries is about 18 weeks for women after the birth of a child, and then for fathers the average is 8 weeks. Now again, that's not the inclusive paid leave, but countries have different approaches. But just to give you a sense, it's fairly standard play in many other industrialized countries that you have a minimum of 8 weeks paid leave, and then up to more than a year.
I mean, there's so many things that come to mind. My friend in Germany, whose job is secure for 3 years, after she leaves for a year, and the
Yeah.
forced, exit before the baby's birth. And these are just, as you say, maternity. I have
Right.
a friend in Japan, of course, who the paternity is being incentivized for a bonus because they want to create inequality among the gender roles in the traditional family structure. I mean, this feels so much more advanced, right? I mean, you're incentivizing different behavior among gender versus even just a basic question of, do we have this on offer?
Right. And I mean, paid leave is one of these magical policies that has so much data behind it that demonstrates its value. So you have paid leave, you instantly reduce infant mortality rates. Who wants to have a high infant mortality rate? You reduce infant mortality rates, you lower maternal depression, you boost gender equity with men having access to paid leave. That strengthens families. Reducing paid gender gaps. And I think one important element too that's getting more traction in the US is the impact for businesses, because historically, big business has been the opposition to passing paid leave in America. And we've got a lot of data that just shows it's a silly argument for businesses to be making, because when businesses offer paid leave, they increase retention, worker productivity, and actually bottom line, So they're more profitable. So it's really,
It seems like a win-win-win kind of
yes,
situation.
yeah,
So let's talk about this. I mean, you are obviously on the cusp of, well, you've been pushing. I mean, you've been at Plus now for a year and a half or so. I can't
yep,
recall.
that's right.
Um, I mean, tell me about what's happening at Plus and what's, kind of the state of play of paid leave in the US now.
Yeah. Well, Plus has been around since 2016 and really was focused on helping win more Americans paid leave with major corporations, shape the public narrative, and then advance public policy. And I think in the context of the last year and a global pandemic, uh, it has helped make the invisible visible. So the way that our caregiving systems are so broken in this country, so many Americans who had not experienced that face to face were forced to as things shut down. I know we lost childcare in our family, and you have to figure out what do you do without these structures of support that, again, so many Americans did not have in the first place. But I think COVID was helpful in kind of opening the aperture for members of Congress as well, as they've heard from their constituents that, if I had paid leave, especially for women, I would have been able to stay employed. And now we're looking at about 2 million women who've left the workforce as a result of COVID this last year, of losing employment or being forced out of the workforce because of caregiving challenges. So I think COVID has helped accelerate the pace and the possibility of passage of paid leave this year. So last year, we saw for the first time ever, Congress passed emergency paid leave legislation, which was incredible. It offered up to 10 weeks of paid leave for parents who were dealing with school closures. But permanent's not enough. And we can't just offer it in the middle of a pandemic. So what we saw at the end of April was a really exciting moment. So President Biden introduced, for the first time ever from a US president, a proposal to create a national paid leave program. So that's where we are now. And now the fight's really turning to Congress to say, how do we make the argument for paid leave? Because as much as COVID has helped accelerate this fight, there's still a lot of entrenched opposition to passing paid leave in this country.
So I want to talk about that opposition because you've raised a whole slew of data points that point, of course, we always have our biases when we're on one side of an argument or another. However, the fact that we are 1 in 4 countries around the world who have zero paid leave, whether it's parental, or family leave or medical, much less the fact, of course, that you've just pointed to all these added positive benefits that statistically show up, including the bottom line and profitability for businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Where is the opposition coming from, and how, after a year of such obvious need, is that there a leg to stand on?
Yeah, it's a great question. Now, I think the key opposition arguments that we typically hear, or for example, there was a hearing this week in the House Ways and Means Committee, and we heard Republicans really arguing against a national paid leave program. They want a program that really incentivizes employers to, through tax credits, to offer paid leave. They want to provide businesses with flexibility and not impose any additional costs. Now, on the first part of that argument, I would love to incentivize businesses to provide paid leave, but I think this is the country we've been living in for the last many years. Like, we've already seen how anemic the pace has been for employers to offer paid leave, and again, it's only to the highest wage workers. On the impact and cost to businesses, I think one of the really interesting things the Biden administration has done is the proposal they have on the table actually does not cost small businesses or big businesses a dime. We do have paid leave in 9 states in this country, and some of them run it through a payroll tax. So there is a tax burden on the employee and the employer. But the Biden proposal would have the cost of this program come from capital gains. and also from greater enforcement of the IRS. So it would actually be a pot of money. And, I think in the context of economic recovery right now, everyone's concerned about small businesses. I certainly am on the streets of Brooklyn seeing who's had to close down. But we know that having paid leave actually helps small businesses stay afloat. And now through the proposal that we see, small businesses actually wouldn't even have to pay into that to be able to have their employees access that benefit.
That's pretty amazing. And again, I just want to, I don't mean to harp on this and be dumb about it, but like, we are talking not just about maternity leave for new moms. We are not just talking about paternity leave, gender neutral, but like a new baby or an elder in the family, right? We are also talking about if I get ill or I have a surgery and like what portion of my salary I can access. So in some of these countries, you mentioned Sweden before. I mean, I think, my friend in Germany, right? I mean, there's a tiering depending on the length of time that you're out. If you get 100% of your salary, 80%, 70%, 50%, whatever, every country seems to be different. What are we looking at if you think about those small businesses? Are we talking about people get 100% of salary? What are the details in this?
Yeah. So what the Biden proposal included, and this is part of the American Families Plan, is 12 weeks of paid leave for parental, caregiving, and personal, although it'll be phased in over a 10-year period. So we won't start there. We'll see how it's phased. Details are forthcoming. And then it will have partial wage replacement. So I think what the average will be is around 2/3 of a worker's average weekly wages. But one thing that we love about this is that it would actually rise to 80% of wages for some of the lowest wage workers, which really matters. If you're making minimum wage and you're only getting 2/3 of that paycheck, you're not going to take paid leave. You can't afford to. So I think that was the progressive wage replacement is important. And then again, just equitable leave for all parents, a broad definition of chosen family. And one other cool thing with the Biden proposal is they also expanded the definition to include survivors of domestic violence if you need to take time to move through that moment in your life, and then also for military deployment. So I think those are two other expanded definitions that are really meaningful for people who need to have time to take care of themselves and their family.
Absolutely, and it certainly seems very human. I think that's the part of paid leave that always strikes me is it's so inhuman, to think of ourselves as machines who should just keep being productive. And to your point about businesses, there's a solid business case, but it's been anemic in the way that companies have rolled it out when it's been a choice. And I think as we think about anything that's social, impact / sustainability related, the younger generations who are coming up into the workforce, certainly millennials, of which I know you are one, but also Gen Z and soon the alphas, in the next 10 years you're talking about, I mean, they're going to be all in. This is not going to land, I don't think, right? So it's interesting to imagine, in my opinion, kind of where the turn of the tide is, because so much of what you're describing seems inhuman that we don't have something on offer already.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually a really important part of the debate right now to ensure that policymakers on Capitol Hill are paying attention. Is paid family and medical leave is a really wonky term, and you can get really tied up in the details of the policy. But I think when we see the greatest impact in our work is about bringing forward the stories of real people and the moments in their lives when they've needed to take leave. And I mean, the difference we're talking about, I would just even share my own brief story, which is when I was a kid, both of my parents actually went through cancer, and neither of them had paid leave from their employers, certainly not the state of Idaho where we lived, but they had benevolent employers who made the time and space for my father to care for my mother as she went through cancer, to care for us, keep our lives feeling as normal as possible. And we also had an extended family that had financial means to help buttress us while my parents were unable to continue collecting a paycheck. And I just think about how different my experience would have been if as a young child, I was seeing my parents sweat, paying for the bills versus seeing the love and care and the space we were able to create for our family, as we went through losing both of them. So it just like, I can't imagine, or I can imagine, and I think about what that is like for people day in and day out in those moments and how we care for each other and our communities. And I just hope that that's one of the upsides of COVID, is seeing more of the humanity in each other.
Molly, I thank you for sharing that. It's so touching. And I mean, your parents must be so incredibly proud of the work that you're doing now. It seems meant to be, right? I mean, it was predestined somehow that you'd end up in this situation, really starting to change the world for so many. I do hope that it passes. I mean, I think the last thing I'll ask as we wrap up is, this is obviously the American Families Plan is going to Congress. We are looking towards, a hopefully decision, I would say by end of year, maybe beginning of next year. What can people watching or listening to this do to support PLUS's, actions and anything else that you'd like to leave listeners with?
Yes. Thank you. We need as many voices as possible, calling and emailing your member of Congress. I know it seems simple, but it actually matters. We need members of Congress hearing that people want paid leave. You can go to paidleave.us, sign up, and we will help you activate at key moments with easy scripts and easy ways to reach your members of Congress. We also need people to share your story. So every time we speak with a member of Congress, every time we develop a new creative ad, we need people to share their stories about why it matters to them. And then the other constituency, I'd really call it our business leaders. So as a business leader, a small business owner, having your voice elevated on Capitol Hill is really critical. Back in March, PLUS launched a letter of 250 businesses that signed on to support paid family and medical leave. And we're bringing everybody virtually to Capitol Hill the week of June 21st to advocate. So if you are a business owner, a business leader, and you're interested in using your voice to advocate for this policy and for your employees, please reach out. Again, paidleave.us. We would love to have you involved and serving as an advocate for paid leave.
That's amazing. Well, that's in just a few weeks' time. It seems like a perfect summer solstice opportunity to broaden the aperture of what we are capable of in this country and what we provide to our citizens and our workers. It's amazing. Molly, thank you so much for joining us on Future of XYZ today. It's a fascinating and very important conversation and great work that you're doing. I'm pretty awed, even though I was awed before we even did this. So thank you.
Oh, thanks, Lisa. It is always so fun to talk to you, and I really appreciate the conversation.
Absolutely. And for everyone listening or watching, if you don't already subscribe to Future of XYZ, make sure you do. We're on YouTube. And everywhere you get podcasts, from Spotify and Apple to Amazon and beyond. And of course, you can follow us on Instagram at Future of XYZ. We will look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks again, Molly.
Thanks, Lisa. Bye-bye.